Okay, so before I go any further, I'm just going to say that I'm really not editing this video at all. I'm a bit tired, and this is just going to be a long rant anyways. So, yeah, no cuts. If I make errors, then oh no, I made errors. I didn't cut them out. No big deal. So, behind me, I have arguably the biggest cause of gray squares being posted in Discords for space engineers in the entirety of the game. And that is, of course, your favorite, or in most cases, least favorite RWI defender. Now, once again, there's even more things I need to point out before I go any further. And the first thing is that I looked far and wide, at least on the workshop. I could not find any version later than 2016, which is a long time ago, in case you haven't noticed. Yeah, it's 2016. So, maybe I didn't look far enough, but knowing Jack, he would have floundered it everywhere. And the fact that I can't find it means this is probably the most updated version there is, anyways. Now, I would love to go into the other ships in depth, but to my knowledge, this is the only ship that Jack built truly on his own, and you can see that in the way it is shown. I believe a couple of the other ships, especially the big one, and I think the Phoenix, or something like that, was also built with some of his friends, and those look a little bit better, considering that people Jack worked with, especially Venom 415, are pretty good at building. Venom has been one of the oldest good creators on the workshop, and when it gets to the point that people like Omega are taking inspiration from him, you know he's doing well. Jack, on the other hand, just happens to be the guy who's with all these good creators, but really isn't that good at building ships on his own. For the time being, I'm really not going to go inside because that's just way too much effort. So I'm going to stay outside, and mostly I'm focusing on two parts. The meta of this ship, in other words, how good does this ship function, and then the aesthetics of the ship. Does the ship look good or bad? Once again, this is 2016, so it didn't have access to that many blocks. For the most part, I'm going to let the mods slide, as back then, you really didn't have much to do in terms of weapons and anything, and paint, you didn't have much, and these armor slopes, while it is somewhat sad having to resort to, like, 3x1 armor slopes, they are really what you had to deal with back then. So, yeah, as well as, like, all this paint, because, let's face it, normal paint just looks terrible at dark colors. I mean, look at that, it's even pixelated right there on the edge. Anyways, actual content of this video. Why does this ship suck? Well, let's start with the meta. First of all, the ship is very big. And I'm not going to criticize that too much because the entire point of Jack's fleet, the RWI or whatever, they make big ships, okay? It's lore. In lore, people's ships can be bigger or smaller. That's fine. When it comes to a survival aspect, of course, big ships don't make that much sense because they take up a lot of resources. Something such as the square cube law exists, which basically means that if this ship gets twice as long and twice as wide and twice as tall, it'll get, twice as wide. But it will also get 4 times the surface area and, like, 8 times the interior volume, which means that building big ships just gets proportionally much more difficult to do. So ideally, you want to consolidate as much as you can into a small space. The next thing is the cube likeness of this design. Cube. There's really not much in terms of how well this cube is utilized. The main reason being that cubes generally tend to have very bad broadsides. In this case, your ideal angle of attack would be from up here, because as you can see, all of these weapons are angled like such. They're not even angled in the proper direction. to be honest. So attacking someone head-on leaves you with only a couple of weapons firing from a long enough range. So it leaves you a really bad, like, this side exposed angle when you're attacking someone, which really isn't good and often leads to dying. The next survival thing that I want to mention is that, to my knowledge, there isn't a door on this ship. There is just the airlock, or not the airlock. There's this hangar back here, which I've punched a hole in because I wanted to go inside. That's it, to my knowledge, for getting on the ship. So, especially in a survival scenario, considering how far you need to go from the airlock, then up like 5 flights of stairs to get to the bridge where you can actually fly the ship, that's an insane distance to go. It would make a lot more sense to have a door right near the bridge, even if that was your only door. Having it near the bridge at least means easy access to the bridge. And in most ships, at least modern ships, they will have a door near the bridge and then just like airlocks elsewhere. But the bridge door there because, you need to get into the bridge. With that, we can be segued into the next point, which is the bridge. And oh boy, the bridge. It is bad. Well, I'm not really too concerned about the fact that it has a bridge. The interesting part about the bridge is that there really isn't anything other than a bridge. There's just a bridge, and then no CIC, no other chairs. If your 2 helm bridge seats get taken out, you're pretty much dead in the water. And while from a cinematic perspective that isn't too bad, from a survival perspective, you don't want your cockpit exposed like that, especially when your ideal angle of attack is right here where I've got a clean shot at it. Let's talk about weapon complement. This thing could have definitely been more weapon optimized. There's a spot right here where you could have stuck a gun. There's spots all over the place where you could have stuck a gun. And while you did stick a lot of guns up here, you didn't continue that theme throughout the rest of the ship. And there's only so many point defense weapons. I do know on one of the more recent versions there was a big gun right here, but it's not here on this version. But I'll still talk about it. Once again, big gun. That means your ideal angle of attack is from like down here. And that makes a bit of sense. Obviously, the ship is capable of flying in a planetary gravity, so orbital bombardments with that big gun. But then you just kind of have this big gun, and then all of your other guns are on the top, and you're vulnerable from attack from the bottom anyways. So, the big gun, it's useful, but there could be more of it, and there could be more of the rest, too. And in better places. Also, you need doors. That's pretty much the extent of the meta, not to mention the fact that the ship is just poorly optimized inside, with a whole bunch of stuff. There's a lot of meta players in my Discord. I could probably ask them everything they feel about this ship, and they would give me like a couple trillion different ways in which the ship isn't meta worthwhile, but that's that. Next, I'm going to go about aesthetics. You can probably tell already that this ship really isn't that aesthetically pleasing. I'm not really going to go over the fact that these blocks look like trash, because once again, as I've said, this was really all you had in 2016. But this ship, it just don't look good, man. And you're like, why will that matter? Because meta matters, obviously, because you're taking it into combat. But why does it looking good matter? Well, that's because you're using it in cinematic. Jack makes a cinematic in like every single video nowadays, and this is in a decent amount of them. If you've got a ship in cinematics, it's also got to look good. That's just like a baseline required. Your ship needs to look decent in order to be useful in a cinematic. If it doesn't, it's like, oh, well, I'm flattering my bad-looking ships in this cinematic, and the cinematic is just flat-out bottlenecked by the fact that the ships don't look good. And it's pretty easy to see why. For starters, it is a block. One of the main things about building is that you cannot have any flat surfaces around here. And now, if you would like to look, I would like you to spot how many flat surfaces you see. I see a flat surface here. I see a flat surface here. There's a flat surface here. There's one there. There's one down there. There's these long, sloped flat surfaces. There's flat surfaces there, all the way up here, all on the front, nose, up here, up on the top, although he did try to break it up with these weird fins, which honestly make the ship look a little bit worse in my opinion. Because now it's like, oh, my ship is destined to be a hot rod or something. Yeah, you get the point. There's flat surfaces in a lot of spots. Flat surfaces aren't really akin towards space engineers building, and it's just a block with nacelles. Secondly, we're going to talk about these nacelles here, and how badly these thrusters have been placed in. Once again, these are straight slopes, and then this thruster design, which seems to be fairly common. Now, I'm not going to go into the nuances of it, because it's very difficult for people to realize what it is, especially people that watch Captain Jack, considering that they've had to deal with this. But people who build a lot kind of get an idea of where I'm coming from with what stuff just looks bad, and it's for reasons that, because it does, and a whole bunch of, reasons I won't be able to explain. So, first of all, this kind of thing here. Why does it look bad? Because it does. Main reason is this point here. One of the big things of these thrusters and generally space engineers in a building like this is you don't want these sharp points, at least not when they're everywhere. As you notice, they're here, they're here. You can see all of these sharp points around the ship everywhere, including right here where you've got sharp point, sharp point, sharp point, sharp point. Secondly, a thing called repetition. We don't like repetition when we're building ships, at least not aesthetically. The better bet to do here would be to rip these guys out, just kind of like this, and then fill them in a little bit. I know I'm kind of building Jack's ship for him here, but at this point, he kind of needs help because it's not looking that good. There we go. Now you've got a hole, and although it's a little bit off-colored, at least the ship and this hole doesn't really have any of those weird repetition spots. If you wanted to break it up a little bit more because you thought it was too wide, what you'd do is you'd take these thrusters and you'd move them a bit over here so you'd have two separate holes. Next, turret basing. So, let's move the sun back to where it was. There we go. So a big thing about turrets is that you need to give them some substance, something to rest on. I don't know if I have a design immediately on hand. Maybe I'll find something over here, but this doesn't look like it. I don't know if I can really base off of this one. The main thing is that turrets, they like solid bases on them. I don't know where I can find a good example. Actually, the ship from the last video. So, look at this. See this? See how the thruster, it's got like a base. It's a solid base around it that kind of gives the turret stuff. It makes the turret feel like there's an actual turret emplacement there, and the ship was designed around the turret. You can see it here too with these spots. Not really so much here or here, but mostly it's like here and here and here. You can see how the turret, the ship is kind of built around the turret. Here, it isn't so much. The turrets are just kind of slapped on where there's free space for them. And that turret basing, giving your turrets a way to really connect with the ship, is one of the things that makes turret emplacements look good. They're stuck in there. That turret ain't going anywhere. You can also see this on Outland ships where they'll have a long, lightly colored panel, and then it expands out and adds more room of the dark color to let the turret sit in there. That was a very bad explanation, but I don't want to load in an Outland ship. Yeah, so turret basing, that doesn't happen. Final thing I'm going to go over for why it looks bad is, as you might guess by now, the paint scheme. Colors in space engineers are not something to be taken lightly. Paint can make or break your ship, And without paint, your ship really isn't made. So you kind of just have to paint your ship. I'm going to spawn another example here, albeit they are from me, so I am kind of just tooting my own horn here, but they are the examples I can think of on the spot for how paint should be, or how paint should be done better than what it's done here. So this color scheme over here is a bit more mild. The main thing that makes Captain Jack ships bad is the contrast of it. Black is a very defined color, right? Actually, this might be gray. Black might be, yeah, black is blacker. But it's still very dark. And then red. And red is obviously a very bright, contrasted color. Only props I'm going to give to Jack is that at least he uses the red as a highlight color and not a primary color. The primary color would make it look worse because red bricks just look terrible. This black grayish here is great as a dark undercolor, utility color. You paint your thrusters black. You basically control shift middle mouse button the entire ship with the black, and then you paint the lighter parts lighter to make sure that the insides and the utility is all this like utility black, and that's what this is for. However, you also have this red, and everyone knows that red goes with black, just like straight on top of it, and that's what we have here. Now you might be thinking, yeah, well the IMDC, actually I'm going to leave that there, the IMDC, they do red on red with black, right? Well, I'm going to pull out an atlas here. If you'll look, the IMDC has a third color, and that third color is gray. And the reason gray works is because it helps uncontrast this entire build. As I've pointed out many times, red and black contrast a lot, and you don't want your entire build just looking like a contrast block. So what you do is you have this gray. This gray doesn't clash too much with the black, although it does a little bit. And then the red doesn't really clash that much with this. Having these three colors, which is the ideal amount of colors to have for any given space engineer ship, allows you to use, for example, this here where you've got this panel and then it goes in, and then you've got the gray, to highlight depth. And that's one of the things that make ships look good is depth. You've got the gray, and then underneath it you've got the really dark gray black color. It's as simple as that. And then, on the gray, you paint with the red, because accents and such. However, here, as you might notice, there's no gray, there's no middle color of any sorts. There's just red and black, and that leads to a lot of contrast. I'm going to go over this ship. As you might notice, there's that dark gray, which I'm using in here. There is this mild green, which I chose, one, because Omega used it, and Omega is a god, and two, because it's just light. It's not that contrasty, and it's mellow. And that allows it to fit in nice and mellowly with the default gray and the default gray, and the default dark gray down here. And that means that I can paint it around in spots that work without feeling like it's going to be super contrast. Meanwhile here, if you paint red, it's just really contrasty, and it looks bad. Furthermore, Captain Jack painted it in stripes, and these are not just like your average stripe, these are long stripes, i.e. this stripe literally goes down the entire length of the ship, minus those two hanger blocks there. It even gets the window here. Well, it skips that block too for some reason. Basically, aside from 3 blocks on the entire ship, this stripe goes uninterrupted the entire way. And stripes don't look good It takes some people time to realize this, but stripes just, they don't look good. At least not when they're this long and thin. What you want is, once again, IMDC ship, you want blotches. Or if you're going to do stripes, make them horizontal stripes, like this. They go across. And they stay small. You don't want large patches of red. You just want a blot, like this one here, and this here. Just a little bit. You can see it, but it doesn't take away from the ship too much. And then the ship isn't defined by this super large red stripe. Well, that's it. That's pretty much why Captain Jack's ship sucks. I might want to go more in depth into this later, but for now I'm getting tired of this long and really annoying to keep speaking about rant that I wish to not continue further because of all the reasons I just said. As such, I hope you have a good day. Captain Jack is bad at building ships. Goodbye.